Awesome.
Jeff,
Thank you.
thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Nestle made the introduction for us, and so I'm happy to have you on the podcast. So the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast, what piqued my interest, is you're a producer of horror movies, and back in the 80s and 90s. Specifically, Leprechaun is kind of what, oh yeah, I've seen that movie before. And so Nestle thought it would be an interesting guest to have on the podcast. So thank you for doing that. But you do much more things, and we'll talk about that as well. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is like, what was your role in making the movie Leprechaun?
Uh, Leprechaun, first of all, is really something that I loved a lot. The whole experience of it. For instance, the director, Brian Trenchard Smith, is one of my best friends.
Very cool.
We met. I admired his work. If you look him up, he has a really interesting background himself, has made many movies. One of Nicole Kidman's first films, BMX Bandits. He's an Australian filmmaker. Yeah. And which is a good little film, by the way. And what I love about talking about Leprechaun is, to me, it was true producing. I've done many other forms of producing in my career, executive producing and so forth, where you're more working on the finance side, or you're just, one cog in the big machine on something like Around the World in 80 Days with Jackie Chan. But Leprechaun was one of those rare opportunities that a filmmaker, just somebody gives them money and says, go make a movie, and it's going to be in the theaters and out in DVD in 6 months, so please do it fast.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. My role in Leprechaun, and to be specific, the Leprechaun series, it was the ones that I did were Leprechaun Goes to Vegas, and then Leprechaun Goes to Space.
Okay.
And what happened was Trimark was the studio at the time. They were later bought by Artisan, which then became Lionsgate.
Oh.
And Cami Winnikoff was, the main executive at the time. Mark Amin was the president. I mentioned their names because if you look them up there, have done a lot of great things over their careers, and it's interesting to look at what they've done. But they had done the first two Leprechauns, and the first one was a big success theatrically as well as on home video, one of the biggest home video titles of all time.
How cool.
And, they must have made it for, I don't know how much, but I'm just guessing between $750 and $3 million. And they then did the second one. By the way, I think Jennifer Aniston was in the first Leprechaun.
I was looking at that. I was like, Jennifer Aniston was in this movie?
I'm not sure it's on her resume, but she was in it, and she was great in it, running around being chased by Warwick Davis. But then they did the second one, and the second one did not, it tailed off like a lot of series. The first one caught fire. It came out at the right time, right theatrical campaign. Kind of engineered by a friend of mine, Tim Swain, at Trimark. But the second one didn't do as well. And so they thought, well, the series is ending, so we just need something to have out there.
Yeah.
And make money on selling DVDs. And so and I was working with Trimark, the Trimark studio, on another project. And they said, we've got this problem. We've got to make this Leprechaun movie. And, but we've got to get it out in 6 months.
Whoa.
To take advantage of, this time window where they perceived was a dwindling window.
Okay.
It might have been 9 months, but we ended up having 6 months. So the moment they said this, and knowing a little bit about the franchise, because my company had been offered the opportunity to make the first one, and we got busy with some other things. So I knew the script, and I knew the franchise.
Okay.
I immediately thought of this, because as an independent filmmaker, independent producer in Hollywood, making at that time non-union films, to me, that and horror films, one of the most important thing is where are you going to make this? Because you can't, create elaborate sets, and you don't have a lot of time. So where you're making something is often, integral to whether you're going to be able to make it on time and on budget, and if it's going to look cool.
Yeah.
And so, I had always been wanting to make something in the in this place called the Ambassador Hotel, which was where Robert F. Kennedy was shot.
Okay.
It's famous for many other reasons. It also had the Copacabana nightclub. The Brown Derby was across the street. In the golden age of Wilshire Boulevard and Hollywood, the Ambassador was one of the most luxurious hotels in the world.
Okay.
And its grounds were like going to Miami in the 50s or 60s. It was beautiful grounds, many acres right on Wilshire Boulevard between Vermont and Western, I think.
Okay.
It's now a big LA school, Los Angeles public school. Okay. And so, but it was in disrepair. So it was abandoned. And I had, gone through it and scouted it a few times. And then when it was in its, when it was dwindling, I actually had a cabana with some friends at the pool of this old, deteriorating hotel in it. And so I immediately thought, you can make this into Vegas, and Leprechauns in gold. So I said, how about Leprechaun Goes to Vegas?
Okay.
And they said, let's go. And they,
wow.
You've got I won't say the budget because I don't want to, let's make that the magical part. They said, here's the money we have, just go to town. No bond company, whatever. And because I'd worked on this other movie with them, they could trust I was going to show up. And so I came up with the concept, but then we looked for writers for the project. And we also said that it's got to be, the director's got to be Brian Trenchard Smith, because we can trust him on with a film like this. And he got into it right away. And I think key to also it being like a really great experience was, and it was like kind of the icing on the cake in terms of just realizing something being creatively satisfying, was Warwick Davis was a total revelation in terms of working with a star who's behind this mask, who is actually this amazing actor.
Yeah.
And then Gabe Bartalos, who was the head of makeup and had created this look, he signed on for number 3. So all of that, those were like things that were a surprise along the way.
Wow, okay.
But it was a true producing experience where you are literally producing this thing from scratch based on a concept, and there's a distributor who is, waiting at the end of the rainbow to say, that's what we want. We're going to get it into, it had a little limited theatrical release and into home video.
That is interesting. That is fascinating. So it came to you, the company was you said Trimark. Trimark. They came to you and said, hey, we need this movie made. Leprechaun has this dwindling time frame right now. First one was a success. Second one kind of tapered off. Here's the money, make it happen. Your role is putting together these pieces of who's going to direct it, who's going to act in it.
Right.
Is that
who's going to write the script?
Who's going to write?
Develop the script. David DuBose was ultimately the writer of the screenplay. And Brian and I and my partner Walter Jostin, and we had a good development team at that time, Craig Nichols and others. We shaped the script, and then also we shaped the script to this location.
I see.
Which was a massive, ghost. Yeah, it was just this abandoned, massive building with all of these ballrooms and an underground and all these things that were, for a filmmaker, just really ripe for
Yeah,
creativity.
it sounds
Yeah.
fun. You said Ambassador Suites, or what is it?
The Ambassador Hotel.
Okay, I thought you said the Embassy Suites. I was,
Oh, no.
I was like, okay,
yeah,
they had,
the
that's a good
Ambassador
place to
Hotel.
film. Okay,
Yes.
Ambassador Hotel. Okay, that paints the picture. That paints the picture. Okay.
When Robert Kennedy made his, so I don't know if it's apropos to my, what I'm doing with my own nonprofit work, but in 1967, 68, Robert F. Kennedy was the presumed winner, going to be the winner, the candidate who went against Nixon in the upcoming presidential election. He had just won California, and he gave his final speech at the Ambassador Hotel.
Oh.
And while he was walking from where the speech was to some other area, maybe to exit the hotel, he was shot by Sirhan Sirhan, assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel. And so when we were making it, we could see the X mark where he died, and everyone knew it. And it was a very famous incident. The photos of it, Sirhan Sirhan was captured there. Rosie Greer, who was a big, anyway, there's a great history to the Ambassador Hotel. Also, it had the Copacabana nightclub, which was again in ruins. So it's a great location.
Fascinating. Okay.
And then we did a couple of days in Vegas.
Okay, fantastic. And Jeff, what got you interested, or how did you start getting interested in producing movies in the movie industry? What sparked that interest for you?
Well, I had I really owe a lot, almost everything I have done in the film business to my education at USC. Not so much the classes, although the classes were really, really important, as they were to so many incredible filmmakers who graduated from there. But my fellow students who became my peers and then eventual colleagues. So, but I didn't know, when I went to USC, I was actually interested in physics. And in my most romantic scenario of what I wanted to be in life, I wanted to be a physicist. And so I was that's what I wanted to do when I got a scholarship. I thought that was much, much, much more practical than being a filmmaker. So even though I had been a writer and I had produced some plays that were performed where I grew up, I really wanted to be a scientist. That was the most romantic scenario for me, and I thought practical. The problem was I'm really not good and not as smart as I needed to be, especially in math, to be a physicist.
Okay.
And my heart wasn't truly into studying, right? And so thank God, a friend of mine invited me on to a student film set in 1978, 79. And the moment I was on that set, I knew this was my future.
Wow.
I fell in love with the process of filmmaking. I fell in love with this idea that you're part of this tribe, and you might be the low man on the totem pole, but you know what your place is in this crew. You know what your purpose is. You're literally working off the same page, the script. And, I was pulling cable. That was my job. And, helping the electric department because I knew how to tie in illegally for our electricity. That was the one thing I got from my science background. And yeah, I just fell in love. I fell in love with the process of filmmaking, and from 1978 to right now, I have not been out of some form of production since then. And I've had credits on, financed or produced over 150 movies, representing over $1 billion of production.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, most recent credit is Under the Silver Lake, with Andrew Garfield and Riley Keough.
Wow.
For
Okay.
A24.
Yeah.
And with Academy Award-winning producer Adela Romansky and many other
That's
great
wild.
people involved in it.
Oh, that's so cool. And it's so interesting. Like, you went to school to become a physicist and then ended up becoming involved in like movie producer. Like, really different styles of lifestyles and industries. That's cool thing about, I think, college is you get to come in and try out new experiences, and you never know kind of like what is going to be your niche, but it gives you those opportunities. That's fascinating. Congratulations. And you've been now movie producing, like I said, 150 films, $1 billion in budget or revenue.
$1 billion more in revenue, but $1 billion worth of production.
$1 billion
because that's
worth of
easier for me to
production.
quantify.
Yeah, $1 billion worth of product. That's fascinating. What do you enjoy about it?
You know, I think like a lot of filmmakers, I'm naturally an introvert. You know, I like just being at home, reading a book, walking, you know, and so forth. But when you're part of a film, you're really part of this collective, and you meet all of these different artists and craftspeople, and everyone does a different thing. And then even if you're in LA, even the youngest crews have a tremendous amount of experience. And you never know who you're working with. The person who's only done 6 or 7 movies or 20 commercials today may be an Academy Award winner, you know, in the future. And the thing too, I've really learned to appreciate in my career, that I didn't have as much. Well, even young, I recognize this, but the talent in front of the camera in Los Angeles and probably New York and London and a few centers, the people who are striving to be actors and their professionalism, even at a young stage of their careers, is just amazing. I mean, even on my first student films, I had this one actor, Del Zamora, who then went on to be in Repo Man, a lot of famous indie films. He was just starting out at that time, and on my first big student film, your senior film, is he lived with his dog in a van. So he was from East LA, but here's this young, Hispanic actor trying to break into the film business, which at that time was a pretty ambitious. And he lived in his van with his dog Chivo, and he would always put his van wherever you were filming, you know, so that when he woke up for the early call, you knew where he was, and he would never miss that 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. call.
Whoa.
But for a student filmmaker, what was cool about that is you always knew you were going to have one actor, you know, because you're begging people to be on your film set, and you know, you just never know if someone is going to get a gig that day, and they're going to call in and say they can't be there. But I will say, whether it was Del or any actor, I never had an actor, a SAG actor, not show up on time over all of my career. I mean, there may have been a couple of times where someone got in an accident or what have you, but the professionalism on film sets, from the production assistants to the actors, is just, it's humbling. And so being around people who are that professional and that ambitious, and it really turns you on, basically, being around people like that.
I see. Yeah, so you get lit up by and excited and energized
Yes.
by the professionalism of these people and their desire to become something more than they are, to put out great work.
Yes.
And working in a team all along, following the same script.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
That's
nice
what I fell
tribe.
in love with. Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Wow.
tribe. Yes. Yeah.
Nice community. Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so One of the things that I like to do is have viewers of the podcast ask questions.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I have one or two.
Oh,
One or
okay.
two that
Cool.
I let people know that you were going to be on, and one of the questions was, so you've done 150 movies. Leprechaun is the one that kind of like, oh yeah, that's the one I seen. Before that, what kind of movies did you want to do? What kind of movies do you like doing? What are some of like the stories that you like, or how do you choose the movies that you choose? You said Leprechaun, it was kind of, Trimark came to you and said, hey, we have this problem. And you were working on them with another movie, and they trusted you to show up and do your thing. If it was up to you, what kind of movies do you get into? What kind of stories do you like?
Yes. To answer the question, if I had my wish of any kind of genre to have focused on, it would have been musicals.
Musicals. Okay.
And I say that because I've never gotten to make one. But that's when I grew up watching musicals like Fiddler on the Roof and there's so many others. That was what swept me away. Oliver, all of these great musicals from the 1960s and early 70s. Those were the ones that I'd go back and see 6 or 7 or 8 times. But what really kind of triggered my interest in films as an art form and as something that I'd actually want to be part of was the German New Wave. In fact, Aguirre, The Wrath of God, the first, I'd say, art film that I saw was a Werner Herzog film, Aguirre, The Wrath of God. And I had a friend at that time, Bill Cotman, who was really forward-thinking. So when we were teenagers, like 1974 to 8, he introduced me to punk rock, and he introduced me to, avant-garde new wave films, independent movies with independent visions. And I'm happy to say I got to work with Werner Herzog on Rescue Dawn with Christian Bale many, many years later,
Cool.
as well as John Borman, who made some of my favorite.
I heard that name before.
Yeah, Zardoz, and look him up. An incredible Academy Award-winning filmmaker, and I got to make a film with him as well. So the early independent movies really made me feel passionate from an intellectual standpoint, and also made me realize the importance of independent movies, compared to big Hollywood musicals. But my career went the way it went, I'd say for 2 reasons. One is because when I graduated from school, from film school, I was already, like a lot of my fellow students, we were already making films and making money.
Yeah.
Some of my friends who I worked for were making this new thing called music videos.
Oh.
In 1982, 83, when I graduated, MTV they were making their first videos. And so my friends who I worked for at High Five and other companies, I didn't work for Propaganda, but Propaganda by Yanni Savatsyn was just starting with Steve Golan. They ended up becoming a big feature outfit. But these were people coming out of film school or very young in their careers, were getting massive amounts of money to make music videos, which was a great training ground for learning how to tell stories visually. But I always wanted to make features. So I had produced and directed some commercials. And so I was getting really rich. I probably had $1,000 in my bank account. So I said, I'm going to take off the next 6 months and only do things that I really want to do. And one of the things that I did was I offered to budget and put business plans together for some of my fellow USC students, and so they could, maybe raise money for their independent movies. Oh. And one of my best friends at the time, Kevin Tenney, he had written this script called Ouija, and about characters who get involved with a Ouija board.
Oh, okay.
That became Witchboard, and he met another person, Walter Jostin, who would become my best friend, but also kind of a mentor. And I just really fell in love with this guy. He was just a really cool person, an artist, but he had raised financing on Wall Street, and he wanted to make a movie. He was done with Wall Street. He was in a similar part of his life where he had decided, I'm going to move to the West Coast. I'm going to pursue this. And the first script he read was my friend's script. Oh. And he could immediately see, okay, even if we don't have a star in this movie, I can see everybody knows a Witchboard, a Ouija. We eventually called the film Witchboard because we didn't know if we could get the rights to use the name Ouija. Okay. And Tawny Katane was the star of our movie. It became a big independent hit. And what really separated us and made us true independents is that we paid back all of our investors plus a profit. Oh. So all of these friends, mostly friends of Walter and his brothers, who had, just given them money and, like, we don't expect anything. Once they actually got money back, it was like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And so that really set us on an independent course. But by the time we were making Leprechaun, we were doing everything through studio, financing, and other means. We really didn't need, for a period, we didn't have investors. We were doing, films that you would call pickups, where a company says, if you make this movie, we're going to give you this amount of money when you deliver it to us. And so Miramax was another company that I worked with. I worked with on the Children of the Corn series. Oh. Similar situation. They thought Children of the Corn was played out.
Yeah.
And then they came to us, and then we did Children of the Corn. It was 5, believe it or not. Oh. And so I made 5 and 6. And then that kind of reignited that franchise as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a little bit of time left, but I honestly I'm very interested, and you have a lot to say. These cameras are going to turn off in a little bit. I'm just going to turn them back on, and then can we have a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, like 15 more minutes? Yeah, sure.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. We're back. So now, thank you for sharing kind of like your experience and what got you into making movies and what movies you would want to make, and the Leprechaun and the people involved in it. So much experience and passion that you have for this. That's what you were doing then, but you're still involved in producing. Am I right?
Yeah. I'm an executive producer. I just finished an executive producer, meaning more involved on the financing side. Okay. Like if I do my job right as an executive producer, I'm never on the set.
Okay.
The producer's on the set, the director's on the set, and they're not, I'm in my office and handling things so that they don't have to worry about those. That's how I feel my role is. And so the latest thing I just finished was my first animated feature. It's in the process of being named, so I won't say the name of it yet, but we just made a big sale of it, and there's some really cool cast in it. We should be announcing it very soon.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. Animes. Okay, so how does this come to your attention? Is that something you sought out, or is it one of the things where it kind of just is put on, like somebody brings it to you?
Yes. In that case, a very, very passionate filmmaker who then eventually became my business partner at Story Warrior Media. She had wrote many films for Hallmark and Lifetime. And even though I warned her not to have the ambition of being producer, she would not be denied. And so she optioned a script, and she's a successful writer in Hollywood, but also she's a mother. She has 3 kids, and so she wanted to do something for her kids, and feels like she has her finger on the pulse of that market, and so she really wanted to focus on animation, especially animation for kids, and so that's what she chose, and then we brought it. She put in financing along with other people that we know.
Gotcha.
So it's a true independently produced animated feature. Animated feature.
Now, when you're thinking about this being brought to you, this project, this animated project, do you have a kind of ideal customer in your mind that, I can sell this to Netflix, or I can put this on Lifetime, or like, what is that process like for you, and where will that show be put out? Can you say?
Yeah. I think it's so important for filmmakers who are developing scripts, especially ones who have ambitions of producing, that you're thinking of your final audience. Like who is the audience? Even if you're in horror, there are many different kinds of horror audiences. If you're making an animated film, there's many different kinds of animation, from anime and adult kind of animation to stuff for little kids that they watch on Saturday morning. The vision for the film that we were doing is a theatrically released independent movie for kids that then gets picked up by companies that that are typically streaming or releasing to home video, home entertainment, home television, those kinds of movies.
Okay.
And we made the big sale we made was on the international side to a company so it'll be released theatrically throughout the world. So we're really focusing on an American studio right now.
Gotcha. And what are your thoughts about the movie industry, not movie industry, but the movie theaters?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
When you're talking about like releasing a movie to the movie theaters to show in theater, it doesn't seem to me, like my experience, I don't know what your experience is. Do you still go to the movies?
I don't go to the movies as much as
Right.
I did a long time ago.
Right.
And it's, I don't, and worse, the worst part of it is I'm often disappointed with the experience
Same.
at the theaters. For instance, the screens are all over the place in terms of their brightness, in terms of their focus. Then it's just not the same kind of experience at the commercial theaters. When I go to like the Arrow and some of the independent movie theaters, and that are, I know that there's one in Echo Park. I'm spacing out on the name, but Quentin Tarantino just bought it. Okay. That I get back to, this is why I love the movies. Also, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has an incredible theater. And again, when you go to that theater, it's like you're in the church of movies.
Yeah.
You're going to church. There's a message that's going to come. You're going to be moved. Hallelujah.
Yes.
Whatever kind of movie it is. And unfortunately, we're not finding that. I'm not finding it. My partner and the distribution plan we have for this animated film is going to be an attempt to bring that back, at least for families and kids.
Gotcha.
I can't tell you much about it, but it's going to be a really cool experience for parents and kids in an era where, like for instance, I think last year there were no until late in the year, there weren't any theatrical movies for kids at the theaters until Mario Brothers. So you had many, many weeks where if you were a parent and you wanted to take your kids to a movie on a Saturday, there was nothing for them to see at the theaters. That, the other thing working against it, for me as a consumer, and I think others, is that we're in this golden age still of streaming, where what's being offered on Netflix, Amazon, Apple is incredible. And, I've got this $2,000 iPad and $400 headphones and a $500, chair.
Yeah.
Like an office chair like this, but, nice. And, perfect lighting, and a backlit screen with the iPad. And the experience is
still good. It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have
so
any
it's
distractions.
A big challenge. And I think that is the real the independent spirit. In other words, the voice that says, I want to make a movie. This is my script. I'm going to make it, and then if I have to, I'm going to release it into theaters, and people are going to come because on every weekend people are looking for that. That's what I bemoan. That's not there right now. And right now, I don't believe there's any independent streamer. There's some small, examples of it, but the Apple, Amazon, Netflix, even some of the streamers that release shows for the BBC and that sort of thing. Acorn, I think, is one that I've subscribed to. That's just not the same because, it's not the same for a lot of reasons.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was curious about that because the movie theater seems to be a dying business.
Yes.
And when you're thinking about making movies and then putting it out to the movie theaters, I think people still enjoy going to the movie theaters. I know that I kind of want to see Dune 2 in the movie theaters.
Yes.
But I've had over the past maybe year or so a couple, maybe even 2 or 3 consistent bad experiences in the movie theaters to where I'm just like, wow, man, it feels so much more comfortable to be in your own home consuming this.
Yes.
There is, I think, something special though about watching in a movie theater with other people who are kind of respectful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like you were saying, in a good movie theater, that people want to go watch this movie and they're into movies.
Yes.
There's something really cool about that I don't think you can get from a streaming service watching it by yourself.
I totally agree. It's a different art form. It truly is. And also the conversations that carry out and go forth from that. I felt the Barbenheimer, Oppenbarbie, whatever it was, that phenomenon where you had 2 really good movies. Mm-hmm. And I actually, of the 2, I actually find, Barbie to be a great example of how great the content that's being made these days
Really?
is. Yeah. I mean, it's a movie about existentialism. I mean, it's a really subversive, brave, concept. What they took out of, what they decided to make, in terms of the script and what it's about, and then the actors are amazing. It's so incredibly well done. But, that was a time where you not only had people going to the movies and really respecting what was there, because especially if you go to Oppenheimer, I mean, if I went to see Oppenheimer and someone took out their phone, I'd that would take me out of the movie theater. But people were really respectful, because of the gravitas. Mm-hmm. And then Barbie just, was so entertaining, but also kept you off, that there were so many people in the theaters too. But then the conversations that happened because everyone had to see the movies.
Yeah.
Reminds me of those days when, you went to an independent art house theater and you went because you had to go. Because if you didn't go, you were not going to be part of the conversation. And by the way, that is the philosophy behind A24. And A24 wants to make movies that are the topic of conversation, that are tapping into the zeitgeist or actually stirring up what is being talked in the zeitgeist. And I think that they have done a great job doing that, and that's why so many people want to say, well, what is the next thing coming from A24?
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's cool that A24 is doing that. I think that's, for me, that's the kind of spirit of going to see a movie, is you get to have that conversation.
Yes,
it was all about the conversation. Did you see the movie? Did you see whatever movie over the weekend? Yeah, it was good, or yeah, no, it was okay. But that conversation is kind of why people really enjoyed going to the movie, aside from being able to enjoy the movie, that conversation. And now it's kind of like, oh, did you see whatever show on whatever streaming service? People are having that conversation as well, which is cool too, because I still like that. Okay, great. We'll close up here. So we talked about the movie stuff. You're still into producing. Do you want to touch on your podcast or anything that you have coming up in the future that you're passionate about? So you have the 431 Exchange podcast. This is something that you're passionate about, just like podcasts in general. But it was interesting to me how your podcast, the way that you do it, was more, what I perceived was like more of like an audiobook, and so the voice actor who was reading it was great, like really embodied that spirit.
Yes.
Is that a project that is of your own? This is something that you thought of, or did somebody bring that to you as well? How did that get created?
Thanks for asking about this, and also that particular question. It's something that came as a natural outgrowth of my own experience. So the idea for the podcast, the script that you mentioned, was written by me, and it stems from a book that I'm also writing, a nonfiction book. And then it all stems from the nonprofit that my sister and I co-founded in 2018, called the 431 Exchange. We provide cash scholarships and other forms of support, including mentorships and career development, to adults seeking to transform their lives through education. So for the nurse who wants to, is at one stage of nursing, who wants to go back to school to get a higher certification, we provide cash so that she can hire a babysitter, pay her rent for a few months.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's beautiful, Jeff.
Yeah, and so and then our organization is inspired by a school that my mother ran called the Adult Education Center, and is really in honor of the alumni and teachers of that school.
Wow. That
opened in 1965. And its mission was to train mostly African American women, black women, women of color, the skills they needed to integrate the corporations of the Deep South and the United States. So that's
awesome.
These were the first black women to enter the secretarial pools of Exxon, at the time Standard Oil, of Texaco, Chevron, of all of these companies.
Wow.
So they not only needed super secretarial skills, they also, if you're going to be the only black woman in a secretarial pool of 50 people who have grown up in a different culture at a very difficult time in our country's history, just at the end of Jim Crow, you had to understand how to navigate that. So
Right.
giving them the almost spiritual, holistic skills they needed.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, and so it was at that time that I was privileged to meet a lot of my mother's students, and that's who I've been working with for the last 5 years. So it's been an incredible privilege to be with my mother's students who are successful women.
That's amazing.
Really super successful women, and not just professionally, but also spiritually. They're just really vital women. So I've been making podcasts, and then also we're doing a documentary. So we have a multi-platform strategy to tell this story. And so I'm using my filmmaking skills, applying them to this nonprofit initiative.
That's great. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. I mean, we can close on that. That's amazing. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing your stories and the passion that you have for just like life in general. You like walk around like very just passionate and interested in life, and I appreciate that spirit. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your curiosity and for everything that you're doing.
Great. Thanks.
Yes.